So let's talk about one of the things I want to talk about while people think about your questions, and we can get those queued up if you have them. We can start raising your hand. Maybe we can pass the mic around. Bebo, the original Bebo. Yeah. Do I have it right that you were the first employee?
I was. So I was lucky enough to be the fifth employee of Friendster. Who remembers Friendster? All right, yeah. So that was the first social network, and then unfortunately for many reasons, and I actually wrote a white paper on why Friendster failed and Bebo and MySpace and Facebook eventually won. And that's posted on my website, Maven Ventures, underneath my photo if you want to take a look at that. But I realized after about a year and a half that unfortunately Friendster wasn't going to make it, and the issues were just too deep to fix. So I left and joined Michael and Sochi Birch to launch Bebo. And I was on the board, and I raised the money that we raised and helped build that company and sell it eventually 3 years later to AOL. I think if you guys heard, it was an $850 million acquisition. And then years later, Michael and Sochi bought it back for $1 million, and they just relaunched it today here at the conference.
Yeah, so the new Bebo was relaunched today on stage. If you weren't over there checking it out, what did you think when you see Sean up there? Like, this has been such a ride, such a long journey, right?
Yeah, so, I spoke with them. I spoke with the first group of buyers who wanted to buy the company from AOL, and I wasn't interested in the kind of path they were looking at, which was more of an advertising play. And then when Michael decided to buy it back, I knew he had something really special in store. And it's really interesting. I mean, it's a 3-app process. I guess they just launched the first of the app, which is called Blab, which is a mobile video walkie-talkie. And I haven't played with it yet, but it looked really cool.
Yeah, it looks great. I got to test it out a little bit when they were still stealthily up here practicing. You're a consumer guy. You know a ton about social. You've been, like we've been talking about, in some of the earliest social name brand companies. There's been a lot of buzz lately about how much of investor focus has moved toward enterprise, in part because of how much money there's to be made there. What's the first thing you look for when you're meeting with a founder who has a consumer startup idea?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, the reason why Maven Ventures is really, I think, maybe the only venture fund and incubator that's exclusively consumer. And I do that for a specific reason. That's what I've done as an entrepreneur and an investor advisor for the last 20 years. So I stick to what I know. I know that's not necessarily the popular thing to do as a venture investor or an angel investor. I think there's a lot of very smart people who invest, and we're curious, and so we tend to want to learn new things and invest in things so we can learn about it. I find that to actually be a disadvantage to entrepreneurs, because what you want is someone who can help you build your business. So I could invest in a SaaS enterprise big data play, but I don't think I really help you build that business. And so if you're looking for someone who can help you build your business, if you're doing enterprise business, you should stick to the people who have been successful there, ideally as an entrepreneur, and even better as an entrepreneur and investor. Similarly, if you're looking to build a consumer business, look for those people who have built successful consumer businesses like you're trying to build, because they've seen some of the things you're going to struggle with and help you. So I stick to the consumer side of it, and frankly, right now is a great time to be a consumer investor, because all the hot things are moving over to big data, SaaS enterprise, and that's great. Let the people who are looking for the gold rush go there. Those of us who are still trying to build great consumer companies and consumer brands are sticking it out. And generally speaking, it's during these times, when you see less people doing and less funding going into consumer, are the better times to find great companies. For example, all the social networking companies were launched in the 2003-2004 timeframe during a downturn in the market, and when consumer was really not hot. And we'll see the same thing. I think you'll see in the next 3 to 4 years, companies that were started today are going to be some of the most successful companies, the consumer companies started today.
Let's talk about WhatsApp. What did you think I sense that maybe you were the only person who wasn't surprised at the number. Were you surprised, I guess?
Yes.
$19 billion.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I was surprised. But I'm on record, and you could see my tweets at Jim Scheinman. Look, here's the thing: is sure, $19 billion is going to open anyone's eyes, and I think that there are a couple things to think about. Number one, Facebook, Zuck, and his team of really smart folks in the corp dev group they're not stupid, right? So there's a reason they paid that. Part of it is they probably had to overpay to beat out number 2 and number 3, who are also interested in the acquisition. So that's one. It's a defensive move. But really, they wouldn't pay something that wasn't somewhat rational. So here's how you can justify that. Actually, I actually don't, in the next 2 years, maybe a year and a half to 2 years, I think that WhatsApp might have more active members than Facebook. Think about that. If that is the case, they're going to look like geniuses, right? Because if they didn't have WhatsApp, people would be saying, oh, WhatsApp is going to pass Facebook. The reality is when you look at companies like when they acquired Instagram, we had the same reaction. At that time, it wasn't that long ago, $1 billion for a company that wasn't making any money. It was insane. And now actually that company acquisition looks like pure genius, right, when you think about it, right? So, you know, the valuations are moving on both the financing and the acquisitions very quickly for the top companies that are experiencing hypergrowth. And I actually think it's rational, though it doesn't feel comfortable to us yet. The other thing to think about with WhatsApp is if they do have more active users, you know, 1.5 billion or 2 billion users in 2 years, and Facebook has 1 billion, people are going to be using WhatsApp and they'll be saying, oh, I love WhatsApp, but I hate Facebook, when they don't realize they're on Facebook. I mean, it's what you're hearing with kids today. I love Instagram, but I'd never be on Facebook. What they don't realize is they're actually on Facebook, right? So it could be a really genius strategy.
How important is it if you're building a consumer company, a consumer social company specifically, to be looking internationally, right? This is one of the things about WhatsApp is it has huge traction in a whole range of countries. When you advise companies that are being built here in the U.S., are you saying you have to look further than where we were looking in the mid-2000s when Facebook was built at U.S. college students and look at this global audience?
Well, clearly Facebook has been international from day one. So for them, it was, you know, that was a key piece of their strategy. I mean, I'll tell you, my bias is I love working with companies that are going to focus in the U.S. or English-speaking countries first. That's just me. I mean, you'll talk to other consumer investors who have other biases. That's because I know how to build businesses here that can scale to English-speaking countries. The ideal scenario is then we could scale worldwide. I generally think most companies will fail if they don't focus. And if that means, you know, you're trying to be international, you know, for everybody all at once starting out, you're going to do too many things. And I think it's, back to your original question about what do I look for in a consumer startup, you know, one of the things that I see like 4 or 5 companies every day. I'll see 1,000 companies a year. I work with 10, right? So it's a very, you know, strict filter. And here are the things, there are a couple of things that always come up, right? The first is lack of focus. Most companies I see come and say, we're a consumer company, but the reality is they're consumer and kind of enterprise, and I'm going to do partnerships with big companies to get my distribution. So all I'd say is, like, I'm not going to tell you the right thing to do, but choose one, right? Either be a consumer company or an enterprise company. And what I mean is look at who your customer is. If you want to build a great brand and sell directly to the consumer, you're a consumer company, right? Or sell in the sense of you want to have customers as consumers. If any part of that plan is, but we have to integrate with this enterprise or we have to partner with these companies, you might want to think about, you're really not a consumer company. You're going to end up being a white label shop or a SaaS enterprise play, and that's fine. Then just focus on that. But if you try and do both, you're going to fail. That's number one. Number two, and this might actually be even more important, is you really have to have a big vision. I mean, this stuff is really, really hard to do. I've been very fortunate to be, as an entrepreneur and investor, to work with 3 unicorns, 3 companies that have reached, you know, $1 billion valuation. The first one was a company called Snap. We got acquired by NBC. We were NBC Internet in the Web 1.0 days. It was $6 billion IPO, right? And the next one was, you know, Bebo, which was close to $1 billion, $850 million. And then the third one is a company that I'm an investor and advisor to. It's called Tango, which is going to reach the unicorn status. Tango is a mobile video calling. It's sort of in the WhatsApp space. 200 million members there. And, you know, each one of those companies, and all the companies I work with, started with a grand vision. And just like Facebook, just like Google, right? Connecting the world, you know, finding the world's information. You have to have that if you're going to be successful in this consumer space. Because the reality is you're going to have a lot more downs than ups, like down times and up times. And during those tough times, if you don't have a big vision to pull you through, you're going to fail. So I'd say focus and have a big vision.
You just talked about some of your big wins, undoubted successes. You're a VC, I have to ask you about the anti-portfolio. What did you miss? What did you see and pass on that keeps you awake at night?
Yeah. Nothing really keeps me awake at night. I mean, I think, you know, most of the companies that you see, including WhatsApp, I've seen may or may not have an opportunity to invest in them. A large part of a job as an angel investor or as a venture investor is to find the right company and then to be super aggressive in trying to get in. And so sometimes I might see the right company and might not have an opportunity to invest, or might not work hard enough to invest in the companies. I mean, there's really none that I would say I regret. I mean, the reality is I've made decisions, and I guess one thing to think about is, you just need to move on, right? I look back at my career when I had the opportunity to join Friendster as employee number 4. I also had an opportunity to be a relatively early employee at Google pre-IPO. Financially that would have been a much bigger success, but I stuck to what was important to me, which was getting early in social networking, which I thought was something that was going to change the world. Whereas Google had it did. And Google had about 800 employees, but again, financially that would have been a better call. When I was leaving Friendster to join Bebo, I could have also potentially been in the first 100 employees of Facebook. Potentially, again, much higher return on the investment, although maybe not. You never know how long you're going to last at a company like that growing so fast. Where Bebo just felt like a better fit for me. So I just stick to what's important to you, and good things will happen.
What's the most crazy, aggressive move you've ever pulled to get in on a deal?
That's a good question. I'll have to think of that one. I guess, I'll tell you what happened with Bebo. So I was a head of corporate development at Friendster, and I told the CEO, who's a friend, or colleague, and I said I was leaving, and he said, before you go, why don't you help me find a team we can acquire? So the first company I found was Zuck and Dustin doing Facebook. We flew them out. We tried to buy the company at Friendster. He was too smart to sell for, the tens of millions of dollars, which was crazy to me at the time. And then I met Michael and Sochi, and I thought, this would be a really interesting company to join. So instead of bringing them back to Friendster, I went and, had dinner with them, and we kind of hit it off, and I thought, hey, I'll come join them instead of bringing them to Friendster. So maybe that was an aggressive move.
Questions? Oh, I know you guys got some.
So I should also mention that I run an incubator in Palo Alto for consumer startups, Maven Ventures Growth Labs, and all this is on the web. And about half of my investments are actually incubated in the incubator, and I invest in the seed and Series A rounds for those companies. The other half of my investments are just like a typical venture investor. My general investment is up to about $250,000 in the seed round and another $250,000 in the Series A round. And we have a question.
Yeah, what's your perspective on hardware, and does the Nest acquisition, has that changed anything for you?
Yeah, so, I love Nest, and I've seen a bunch of hardware plays. It's a good question. Hardware is definitely consumer as well. I'm not a hardware investor, so I've generally shied away personally from those investments. And no regrets, it's just I don't know how much value I could have added to a company like Nest. Although I'm rethinking that, because a lot of what Nest's success was not just building a great product, but it was also in the branding, marketing, messaging, product market fit, language market fit, all the things I take my consumer software companies through. The way I look at hardware, though, I'll just be clear, I'm on the record at the end of last year, I thought that wearables was going to be something huge, and I haven't invested in any wearable companies yet.
I see you wearing a Pebble, though.
Oh, but yeah, I'm experimenting with all of it. As a consumer guy, it's really important to play around with this stuff. But the way that I look at wearables from my lens is, to some extent, the smartphone was the last wearable. If you wear it on us all the time, before that was the internet. Like that was something. I look at it as a platform. So the next wearable is going to be the next platform. And maybe it's glasses, maybe it's a device here, maybe it's some jewelry or shirt. Whenever the wearable platform wins, that's when someone like me gets very active in investing on the software side of it. Who are going to be the companies that will win within that new platform? So when I saw the iPhone and the Android take off, all my investments were mobile, right? I got into Tango very early, a company called Check, which is used to be called Page Once. It's a leading finance app. Banjo, which is an amazing app, sort of location-based. So I just focused on the new platform and thought, who's going to win, and how am I going to get involved and help build companies there early? Yeah.
How important is the virality coefficient in the companies you evaluate? And talk a little bit about virality.
So it's a great question. So one of my, the reason I started the Maven Ventures Growth Labs is I mentor at 7 different startup incubators, and they're great, 500 startups at all the incubators, YC, Newman Accelerator, Tandem, Duke University Labs. They're all great, and they all do some great things for startups. In particular, they teach startups how to go from, really nothing, and maybe an idea or 2 people, to professionalize and learn how to pitch and fundraise, which are critical. But what I see is that, in a 3-month program, that's about all you can do, and that's not good enough, right? So I'd work with a lot of these companies after they graduate, and I thought, when it comes to consumer startups, really what it comes down to is growth. I call that the lifeblood of consumer startups. And when I say growth, in particular, my bias is consumer growth and not revenue growth. And so WhatsApp was bought because they had 500 million people, right? They weren't making a ton of money. Instagram, the same thing. But they had a product that people loved, and they were growing it very quickly without spending any money to acquire customers. So that's what Maven Ventures Growth Labs focuses on. It's 100% about how to grow those kinds of companies. And I have 20 mentors who are growth hackers. Now, actually, there's a language and terminology to describe what these people do. But, one of the things I did at people, we focused on growth. We were growth hackers. You can look at it as a science, with the viral coefficient, and there's some science to it, but there's a lot of art to it as well, right? And there's a lot of testing and detail around it. So I don't get stuck on, you're not viral coefficient greater than 1. I look at this as, is this a kind of business that can achieve hypergrowth, and can I help them get there? And can my mentors help you get there? And if I feel like it's focused, a vision that's worth fighting for, something that I care deeply about, and I know that the passion is coming through from the founders, and that we can have a chance of achieving hypergrowth, those are the kind of companies I love working with.
What do you think about future of Snapchat and the future of other private social networks?
So, I'm a big fan of Snapchat, and I was there a little bit too late and not aggressive enough, to your point, to get in there. But, here's why I think Snapchat is interesting. It's not just a new, form of texting. It's actually a new form of communication for, teens, tweens, young adults, and soon for adults and as well. It'll be mainstream. It reminds me of, back in the day when we launched Friendster. I was 30, 31 or something, and all my friends were like, oh my God, I would never use that. I could never put my photo and all my information. I'm like, yeah, you will. It'll be time, But then, all the young adults were using it right away. It's the same thing with Snapchat. And the interesting thing about Snapchat for me is, it's a new form of communication, but it really isn't. It's so clever. And I don't know if they thought through this or, frankly, it just kind of happened and they realized, we're onto something. But when you think about it, it used to be that we were using the telephone as a form of communication. Imagine if young adults at the time, 10, 15, 20 years ago, thought all their conversations were taped. It would be a different world. Just like kids are growing up today with texting as their main form of communication. It's not a telephone call, and every single one of those were taped or recorded forever. It makes no sense. And so Snapchat came along and said, it doesn't have to be that way. We can have disappearing text. And not only that, we can use photos and make it even more engaging. So it really is a new form of communication. Where they go from there, I don't know, the stories is interesting. I don't know, but that alone is a very, very interesting business. So private social networks are a little bit trickier. You have to be careful about building private social networks because they're harder to scale. So they can achieve hypergrowth, but when you look at the track record of companies, and these are great companies and doing well, but not as well as like a WhatsApp or Facebook, like Path and other, pair companies that are looking at how do I get just the 2 most important people or the 10 most important people in my life together. They're a little bit harder to scale. Not that they can't be done, but having the growth hacking work on that, it's going to be a little more challenging.
What's your advice on growing your user base and community building?
Well, there's, we have some stuff written about that on Maven website. I think it's hard to answer that question without context because it's going to be different.
Mine is music and dance.
Which?
My community is music and dance for health purpose.
Your community is?
Music and dance.
Okay,
for health purpose.
Yeah, for health purposes.
For
Health.
Okay, so one of the things to think about is So what you're saying is there's music and dance that will help people with health issues. Is that right? Great.
Yes.
So that's a vision worth fighting for. That's fantastic. I mean, you're changing the world. I think you're going to do good. The other thing to think about, and I don't know if I mentioned this, is how large is that potential market, right? Because I don't know the answer, but let's just, for argument's sake, 10 million people could be impacted by this around the world. Great. That's pretty interesting, but that's not a billion, right? So when I look at companies, like the next step is, okay, so there's someone with passion, someone who can actually execute on this. There's a vision worth fighting for. You're focused. It's consumer. Great. It's 1 million people that we can go after. It's not a company that I'm going to fund, but it doesn't mean that's not something you should do, right? In fact, it's something you might want to think about. Maybe this isn't a company I should raise venture money for. Maybe I should find friends and family if I need to raise a little bit of money, get to profitability, and have a nice lifestyle business. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Most companies are not necessarily going to be venture-backed or should be venture-backed. Now, if you have hundreds of millions of people that you could potentially help, that could be an interesting story for potentially angel or venture-backed. Then what you think about is, and Paul, I think Paul Graham mentioned earlier, if you have customers right now, delight them. Figure out what it is that they love to do with what you're presenting to them. And then the next, and this is really important for all of you who are thinking about growth and viral marketing, how do you make this product better for them and their friends when they invite their friends? That's the secret sauce. I mean, I know it's generic, but just keep asking yourself that. Where can I insert some kind of product, feature, invite functionality that's not just invite friends, but with Tango, it really works only when you invite a friend or family member to join to video call or text. The same thing with WhatsApp. It's not uncommon that communication apps are very viral because they work better when you have your friends and family there, right? So think about that in context of your product and see what people are doing, and when you can merge those two, you might find something that's really viral.
Thank you.
I have a question. When because you're also angel invest, right? And you're talking about getting in early stages with companies. Part of that is to play this really key mentoring advisory role. It sounds like you're really passionate about providing that expertise to companies. When do you tell someone to not raise venture money?
So I would not invest as an angel unless I thought it was a company that could be $1 billion business. That's my personal bias. And I'd say, frankly, most angels would like to invest in companies that are going to get a Series A or Series B from venture. So when I say raise angel money from friends and family, I mean non-professional investors, people outside Silicon Valley.
Sure, but I mean, there are some companies too that, in terms of when do you scale and when do you hold back, right? Because it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, there's so much money out there right now. And so are there companies for whom, or what are the moments when you say, hold up, build it a little slower, retain, keep it a little smaller, keep your friends and family, and wait to scale until X or Y moment? What are the benchmarks for you for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one of the things, there's a time and a place to do fundraising. And that's, your seed investor, whether it's an angel or a venture investor, should be someone who understands that process. When it comes to the kind of companies that I like to build, there needs to be what I call product market fit, which is there are customers who are using your product who love it. Hopefully tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of customers who are using your product and have deep engagement, 30% come back every month, 50% come back every month. So that's number one. And then there needs to be language market fit, which is something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about. But how do you speak about this product, and does it resonate with people, right? And language market fit often comes before product market fit. Once you have that, with the kind of companies I like to build, it's time for Series A. Let's go raise $10, $15 million from large venture investors so we can scale this business and own it before someone comes in and tries to compete. Now, if you don't have that, it's not time to go out. You're gonna, one of the things actually to think about is you really have one shot at generally at a Series A investor or venture investor. If they're going to take a meeting because I asked them for a meeting and I have a relationship with them and they say no, that usually means no forever, right? It's just because, they see hundreds of companies too, and we'll do one a year. And if it's easy for them to, to say no, then they'll just, you're not going to get another shot at it. So be very thoughtful about when you go in to see your Series A potential investors? I think there's another question over there.
Hi, I'm building a weather forecasting startup that has this split business model where we're collecting weather data from smartphone sensors, so that there's a consumer play where we need to get tens of millions of app installs in order to drive the data intake. But really, the startup is an enterprise play where we'll sell weather forecasts to 4 weeks out to enterprises. So I'm curious if you have advice on how to pitch to investors where the model is kind of split like this.
Did you just come in later, or did you hear
I
my...
just came in right now.
Oh,
I'm so
great.
sorry.
This is great. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
You guys remember what I said about every day I meet another entrepreneur who has the lack of focus of consumer and enterprise? And by the way, I'm not picking on you at all, because I honestly, I meet 4 or 5 companies a day, and
Yep.
most of them have this question. Right? Do you guys remember I said that at first thing? Okay. So I'm going to answer this now for all of you to hear how I answer back. Hopefully it'll be helpful for you to think about this as you're building your businesses. So here's what I would advise you to do. You didn't hear this, and maybe you wouldn't have asked the question if you had earlier, so I'm glad that you didn't hear it. Every day this question comes up, and what I would advise you to do is focus. You've got to choose one or the other, because if you don't, 99% of the time you're going to fail at both. The good news is if you have traction on one or the other, then you have a reasonable chance of success, if not massive success, at one. And potentially down the road, when you have more research, how many people are in your company?
There's just 3 of us right now.
3, exactly. How much money did you raise?
We've raised $50,000 from
Exactly.
an accelerator.
Great. It's exactly the great time for, I meet companies like you all the time. I love working with businesses at this stage. So you have 3 people, you have $50,000. If you did this enterprise play, and all of a sudden all of them ask you to start building features for them and integrating this and all, that's all you're going to do. Just let's be honest with ourselves. Those are your customers. And maybe that's the right call. Just call it like it is. You're an enterprise play. Problem is, it's a chicken and egg thing. They're not going to be interested in those deals unless you have massive user adoption, right? So now you got to focus on the consumer side, and you won't be able to build features and focus on those customers because you're too busy trying to build stuff for the other customers. So again, I have a bias for consumers. So if you're going to ask me what I should do, I would look at your business. And by the way, I've looked at some weather app businesses, so I'd be happy to talk to you offline after.
For sure.
But if there's a potential to build a very big consumer business there, I would just tell you, kill all those enterprise deals, right? There's no trade secrets, but when I met the Tango guys, they had the same exact, experience. They had a great team of developers, just a few of them. They raised a little bit of money, and they had every single major handset manufacturer wanting them to build basically what FaceTime was going to be for them. Of course, it made sense for Samsung and Motorola and all these companies. And I came in and said, you know what? I think we could be $1 billion consumer play. Let's kill I know they're going to pay you money, but we're going to kill those deals. We're going to kill those deals. We're going to focus on the consumer, because if we get that right, we control our own destiny, which to me is a lot more powerful. We're not relying on a third party to build our brand and our business for us. We're actually going to control our own destiny. And fortunately, they listened to me, and they're off to the races now. We're going to have a $1 billion company there. And by the way, those deals came back 2 years later after we raised a Series C, and we had hundreds of engineers, and we got paid more money. And what we found is that those deals didn't drive nearly as much traffic as we had thought. In fact, they were really almost meaningless to the core business of Tango. The company's doing about hundreds of thousands of customers every single day,
Right.
without paying any traction.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Before we go, tell us about your accelerator and how many people you take and what the length of time is, how people can apply.
Okay, great. Thank you for asking. So Maven Ventures Growth Labs is based in Palo Alto, and we take anywhere. It's not a batch, so it's a rolling program. I felt like this whole batch system is a little bit unnatural. So if I see a great company that needs help and we have space, they'll come on in. We actually have a 6 to 9 month program. It's free space in Palo Alto. If you're up in San Francisco, we could also talk about getting free space up here. The mentors are based both in Palo Alto and San Francisco. I just want to mention about these mentors. You should look on the website. They're amazing people. They've built companies like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Airbnb. They are the growth hackers either there today, like Akash Garg, who's the head of growth at Twitter, Gustav, who's heading growth mobile for Airbnb, or they were formerly heads of those kinds of companies in growth. So we take 6% equity for the incubating program, and then we put in $250,000 and help raise $1 million to $1.5 million in the seed seed round. And then we also help raise the Series A round and put another 250 in the Series A. And then after that, hopefully you have significant traction and you're off to the races. Our first company, and we just launched last year, at the end of last year, our first company that has sort of graduated from the Maven Ventures Growth Labs, I'm very proud of, just launched a couple of weeks ago. It's a company called Epic, which has a great vision, which is going to basically has now built and will be the leading platform for children's ebooks on the tablet. So if any of
They're
you
going to
have...
be on the stage tomorrow.
What's that? Oh,
They're
yes,
gonna
and
be
they'll be here on the
tomorrow.
stage tomorrow.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. So if any of you guys have any kids under 12, you should download it. It's amazing. Like 35,000 kids are reading on the platform in several weeks. They're doing great, and it's a great example of what can happen when you have a great team with a great vision, with the right help and financing to get to something that's really doing something amazing in this world. So you'll hear about Epic. Two other companies I work with called Shots, which is in the sort of social networking, photo sharing space. It's a safe environment for young adults. And Zana, and they're all on my website. So happy to talk to you more about that if you'd like.
Awesome. Give it up for Jim Scheinman, you guys.